A good Thursday morning. Thanks so much for joining us here on News Nation. Now, I am Aaron Nolan. Got to get to what's happening in Washington. There's never a dull moment in the nation's capital. What happened 24 hours ago was the removal of the Republican leadership from Liz Cheney. Kelly Meyer now joins us from Washington, D.C. Kelly, thanks for joining us once again on these Thursday mornings.
Thank you for having me. It's always great to see you guys.
All right, Liz Cheney was the talk of the town yesterday morning, and I want to read a statement from a fellow Republican, French Hill from Arkansas. Liz Cheney, one of the most conservative, constitutionally minded people I know, and that's why I voiced my support for her today, but to lead House Republicans as we take back the majority in the House in 2022 and work to stop Biden's far-left agenda. She needs to have the confidence of the majority of the House. That proved not to be the case today. What are you hearing about the removal of Liz Cheney from Republican leadership in Washington, D.C.?
Really a mix. We, of course, saw the statements coming through as when news breaks here in Washington, your inbox fills in from both sides of the aisle and what they have to say about what just happened. For Democrats, they felt as though she spoke her mind and was silenced, basically. For some Republicans, they felt as though when they came out and did these leadership press conferences, that it would be a distraction, that they would ask about the party's future and their comments on certain things happening, and Leader McCarthy would have a statement, but then they would say, well, wait, what, Cheney, what do you think? And for leadership, that was causing a problem, and I believe that's what ultimately led them to this decision, to have a leadership team that is all on the same page. She feels as though, and as she said vocally on the House floor on her speech or during her speech, she is not going to stay silent. She is going to continue to speak her mind or speak out against what she feels the former president has said in the past and how she feels about his remarks. She also isn't weighing out a political future, maybe going to the White House one day, or also saying that she wants to continue to hold on to her House seat. So she isn't going anywhere fast. And also, it'll be interesting to see if this just emboldens or maybe grows her voice or makes her voice that much stronger, that much louder post this. I think the Republican leadership there really wants to kind of keep their message the same. And now will this really just get, more reaction from Congresswoman Cheney going forward? Remains to be seen, but it really did stir up a lot here on Capitol Hill. It definitely was the buzz of this week and the past few weeks, to be honest. And now they move into who's next, who is going to replace her in this leadership conference, and then just what their message is going forward.
What does it really mean that she's removed from the leadership role of the Republican Party? She's still a Republican. She's still involved in Congress. So what does this removal really mean for Representative Cheney?
And I think to people back home too, there's these number one, number two, number three Republicans. Who do you go to? There's a lot of just inner workings, inner politics. Who really gets a seat at the table? Whose voice is heard? Who gets their maybe 2 cents in, or what they want to get seen into or heard in these messaging campaigns. So it really is a lot about power, a seat at the table, and just really, who's the next face of the Republican Party. And they're talking about Elise Stefanik and someone who really has been in step with the former president's messaging as well as Leader McCarthy's messaging. So it's interesting to see who they pick for this position and how they move forward. It really kind of just gives them a boost in their positioning here on Capitol Hill, maybe gives them a boost in terms of what sort of things they're fighting for their constituents. At the end of the day, maybe they get a pick of what they want to see into something, or maybe get a push for it a little harder. But for people back home, everyday Americans watching this, it might not be, hitting their pulse. It's basically just kind of what's happening here on Capitol Hill, this kind of insider DC power dynamic that is happening.
Well, I think what's interesting out of this, and I want to get your take on the politicians that you spoke with, Kelly, does this show that the Republican Party is still the party of Trump?
Yeah, that's a big question, and that's something I've been kind of asking around. I'm going to talk with a Republican Attorney General here in about 20 minutes, and, curious to see what the party looks like going forward. But I think we've seen through their actions that, Leader McCarthy went down to see the former president following the insurrection, which is something I believe Congresswoman Cheney has discussed. And that didn't sit well with her and why she's spoken out against it. So a lot of people are still looking to the former president and following in his footsteps, or speaking to people and his supporters as their own supporters as well. So it's interesting to see how this is all taking shape, and it really will be something to watch as we move into the midterms and then of course into the next presidential election, which is always around the corner.
Well, yeah,
so it'll be interesting to see.
the cycles never stop in Washington, D.C. You and I have
It
spoken
really
at
doesn't.
length about that. But I want to get the take from the current White House on the Cheney ousting. I know that Jen Psaki, the spokesperson for the White House, the press secretary, said that this was, not a move. And I want to read the quote if I can find it quickly here. I've got my phone pulled up, and I want to get to that. But she said it's disturbing to see any leader, regardless of party, being attacked for simply speaking the truth. And we would expect the Biden presidency to say that because Biden did win the White House. But what is the response on the other side, and what is the response from the White House on a Republican leadership, a leader in the Republican Party being moved outside of that position?
Well, I think it's just what you said there. I mean, that they are saying that she wasn't able to speak her mind. But I think it goes back to what we discussed here in the beginning of this call, is that for Republican leadership, they come out each week into this press conference room and try to share their message. And for them, they felt they weren't able to get that message across with questions from reporters kind of directed towards Congresswoman Cheney. And there was this visual or visible divide on that podium of where the GOP party is, with McCarthy on one side and Cheney on the other. Whereas some may see it as a healthy debate, for them it became too much of a distraction from the messaging and their campaigning that they were trying to share on that podium, and which is what led them to this moment today, and where we are at now with them replacing Cheney in this conference. So you'll be seeing going forward these press conferences happening, and Cheney obviously will no longer be there. Whoever replaces her will be there, and then we'll see how that messaging changes. I'm sure questions from reporters about Cheney won't stop, and Cheney won't stop talking out either.
All right, so Representative Cheney, though, tweeted out yesterday, and I want to read this as we wrap up this topic: freedom only survives if we protect it. We must speak the truth. The election was not stolen. America has not failed. That was a quote yesterday from Representative Liz Cheney, who has now been removed from Republican leadership. All right, one thing that is affecting a lot of people right now is gas prices. And I know the pain at the pump is not normally something that Washington, D.C. is focused on, but today it's different. Let's talk about exactly what's happening with that pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, we came in here yesterday gearing up to talk with senators, House members about this gas shortage in so many of their communities across the Southeast. And we actually did this story talking with them. Senators Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, two Democrats from Virginia, said, stay calm. A lot of this shortage is coming from people panic buying and going out there and hoarding gas. If you have enough to make it through the weekend, by the end of the weekend, this should be back online. And then we also talked with Florida Senator Rick Scott, who was saying, the Biden administration isn't doing enough, didn't do enough to stop the cyber attack, and then isn't doing enough to get these people who need gasoline. And then hours later, we heard the announcement from President Biden saying, stay tuned for some news in the next 24 hours. Within the hour, we got a breaking news alert from the Colonial Pipeline that they were restarting their operations and they were going to be getting back online. Moments after that, we were able to speak one-on-one with Energy Secretary Granholm, who said, it's going to take a few days for that gasoline to move through the pipeline. She said it moves at 5 miles an hour. It's got to get through there, and expected by the end of the weekend. She again also encouraged people to not panic buy, to not hoard gas, and said that this is don't panic. Basically, things will return to normal, is what she told me. But the bigger thing that we discussed was that cyber hack itself, this ransomware that was put into the system, and the concern from Colonial Pipeline, which is why they shut down, was to make sure that it didn't spread to other systems or impact the pipeline in any way and create some sort of environmental disaster. So we really went into depth about what happens next? How do you protect against a future attack? And that's something President Biden also touched on when he issued his executive order last night, saying that he wants to strengthen training in cybersecurity, and he also wants to improve the federal government's protection against attacks like this.
Very important stuff that we're talking about. If you're just now joining us here on News Nation Now, I am Aaron Nolan, joined by Kelly Meyer live in Washington, D.C. We're talking about gas prices right now. A story on newsnationnow.com right now. Virginia station sells gas for $6.99 a gallon. I can tell you here in the Chicagoland area, Kelly, I filled up for about $3.50 a gallon, and we are not affected in the Midwest by that pipeline that was shut down. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to affect everybody at some point. You mentioned the gas line is back on, and I thought what was interesting was you saying the gas can only move at 5 miles an hour. Look, we all drive faster than that in a parking lot. So this is going to take some time to get the gas back to the people. And when we talk about Virginia selling at nearly $7 a gallon, that's a number we haven't seen in this country ever.
And that's what I wanted to touch on. I didn't mean to break in there with you, but I wanted to say is that that's something else that is important here is the price gouging factor. It's something both the Democratic senators in Virginia discussed, as you mentioned, in Virginia gasoline stations, that people are taking advantage of this. So they also said, stay alert, report it, let us know. Secretary Granholm told me the same thing. She really is trying to send a message to gasoline stations not to take advantage of this moment, not to price gouge. She did say if people see it, report it to your state attorney general and let us know. But that's something that shouldn't be happening in terms of the actual gasoline price and gasoline futures. She said they are looking fairly normal because the pipeline is now back online. So that should calm the market.
All right, President Biden is going to speak on this, Sydney, at 10:50, is that right? 10:50 Central Time, 11:50 there on the East Coast. What do you expect the president to say? I'm assuming he's going to focus more on don't stockpile the gas and the cybersecurity threat that could be hitting gas lines in America.
I think that's exactly right. I think he'll start out with, trying to calm concerns about the access to gasoline. Like he said, of course, people are still facing shortages right now. It's not like they can immediately turn this back on and it's immediately fuel in your pump and in your tank. It's going to take some time. So those people who really need gasoline, he's really going to speak to those people, those communities who are concerned right now. Then obviously talk about the panic buying, obviously talk about price gouging, and then go into the bigger issue going forward. And the biggest question we discussed with Secretary Granholm was cybersecurity, not only just for these companies, but for us personally, and protecting ourselves against these kind of hacks. It happens, and she's mentioned it happened to her mother as well, and on her own systems, and just trying to reinforce our own security, our personal security, our federal infrastructure, and just make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. Because like I told her, this really threw Americans and drivers into a tizzy for this whole 6 days that this was going on and continuing today, just from someone putting this ransomware into the Colonial Pipeline system. So I believe he's going to address that, and that's something we're going to continue to cover here as well.
All right, we will continue to follow that here on News Nation as well. You can follow Kelly as Kelly Meyer News on Twitter. Kelly, thank you for your time. Appreciate you jumping on here with us on this Thursday morning.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you.
All right, have a great one. For more on newsnationnow.com, check out our website. You can follow us on all our social media channels, and we are going to be on the air on News Nation. All you have to do is tell your remote, if you have one of those cool buttons, I have that. You tell the button, you push the button, and just tell it to go to News Nation. Go to News Nation, check us out. We're going to get things started with News Nation Early Edition, 5 o'clock Central Time, 6 o'clock out on the East Coast. Again, you can always follow us. It is at News Nation Now. I'm Aaron Nolan. Have a fantastic Thursday morning.